Well, good morning, Ph.D. Welcome to Doctors and Scientists. That means it's Friday again. And I am so thankful for our guest today. It's great to be able to speak out, but there is a cost. There's a significant cost for speaking out. And it's so wonderful to see people who, they put their money where their mouth is. I mean, they live what they say. And I think that goes in spades for Dr. Raphael Lataster, professor at University of Sydney, Australia, joining us from like halfway around the world. Welcome to the show, Dr. Lataster.
Thank you for that. Yes, I'm joining you from the future. It is Friday here.
It's I love that. I've been to Australia. I've seen the future, and for me, the future had a lot of censorship associated
No
with
hoverboards
that.
yet either.
What's that?
No hoverboards yet. For those of us growing up with Back to the Future 2, there's no hoverboards yet.
No, exactly. What's the deal? Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I've done a deeper dive into what you've done regarding COVID-19, and I have so much appreciation for your inquisitiveness. Just asking the question regarding the effectiveness of the COVID vaccines, the amount of injuries associated with the COVID vaccines, and just posing that particular question. Tell us a little bit about your discoveries and starting from like pandemic countermeasures 2020. They roll out the vaccines in December of 2020. At least they did in the United States. What was that like for you? And you're so analytical. I mean, you spent your career really looking at so many important questions. What was that like for you?
It's been tough. It's felt like being the only sane person in the room, full of a room of just people that have lost their minds.
Right.
I was questioning everything from the beginning. See, I was a pharmacist. I went to pharmacy school. I learned there things like you can never call a medicine safe, right? Pharmaceutical products safe. We just don't have the evidence right now that it's unsafe. And that stuck with me forever. That was from my tutor, who then became head of the department. And I've always been skeptical. While I was working as a pharmacist, rofecoxib happened. So the classic example would be thalidomide. But when I was working, rofecoxib was taken off the market, Vioxx, because apparently that can kill people, even though it was safe and effective. And during the pandemic, we had Folcadine taken off the market as well after, 70 odd years of being safe and effective. That apparently can kill people too. So I've been very skeptical of modern medicine and big pharma especially over the past 2 years. And then COVID happened. Now, in between, after I was a pharmacist, I did a few other things. And at the time, working for the university as a philosopher, basically, analytical philosopher. So dealing in logic, dealing in epistemology. That's my thing now, is analyzing people's arguments, looking at their evidence and breaking it down, basically. And maybe if I'm feeling good, suggesting something positive, something constructive. And then COVID happened and I just questioned everything. None of it made sense to me. The way people were losing their minds over a bug that seemed to be basically like a cold. For me, it was a cold anyway. I know for other people it was more serious. We didn't have anything like what you had with other plagues, people dropping dead in the street. We still have the case in Australia that most people don't even know someone that died from COVID. It was like the pandemic that didn't happen. It was just really bizarre. So I questioned everything. I questioned the seriousness. I questioned whether we needed lockdowns. That was really bad. That was really tough on me, my family. That was quite awful. I was working already from home for New South Wales Health, for the largest children's hospital in the country, Sydney Children's Hospital Network. And I was working from home even before the pandemic. Now, they fired me because the vaccine mandates came in. When the vaccines came in, I thought, not for me. Mm-hmm. I don't believe in something coming from the industry. I don't believe in something being safe after just a few months of testing. And then looking into it later, finding out that even those few months of testing is not really ideal, what happened there. So, I thought I want to wait longer, and I didn't have longer. The vaccine mandates came in, and there you go. I said, no, I wouldn't take it. There's not good evidence for it. So they fired me, and they fired me in a pretty bad way as well. And that gave me psychological injury, that gave me trauma, and
Right.
that led to me fighting my cases. Now I'm currently fighting legal cases against the vaccine mandates, against New South Wales Health, and I've won 2 so far, and
Excellent.
hopefully the third is on the way very shortly, and then the fourth straight after that. And I think I might leave it there and move on with my life. I could potentially go for more, but it's a bit different here than in America, where you can, it's a very litigious society and you can get millions of dollars out of it. Like here it's not
Right.
exactly like that. So yeah, I'm right in the thick of the legal cases. I have been winning. You know, with my lawyer, we've argued successfully that the way they treated me was unjust. There was no point to it. In my case specifically, nothing
Hmm.
made sense because pretty much a few months after I was fired, the vaccine mandates, the pandemic was over and the vaccine mandates started being lifted. It was so pointless. And on top of all that, this is how you can tell that something really isn't right with all of this. There's no logic whatsoever. I was working from home, right?
Right.
So what would be the point of firing me? It potentially could backfire because you're going to fire these people who are staying from home, who are working from home. They now have to go out into the community to seek other
Exactly.
opportunities, potentially spreading COVID. So none of it made any sense. It was very cruel. It was very illiberal, liberal, the little L sense of the term.
Right.
And that ironically led me to, despite all the challenges, to actually doing research because I am a researcher, right? I
Right.
just shifted the focus of research to my first love, which was health. That's how I came about. I was in pharmacy school. I did intend to be a doctor as well. I did
Right.
pass the test to get into medical school, but once I had the offer, I tore it up. I decided that wasn't the path for me, and outright I was looking at the last few years.
Right. Right.
That
You're a
turned out to
doctor.
be a
You're
great
just a
choice.
doctor in something different, right?
That's right. I'm an academic doctor now, but
Right.
I could have been a medical doctor, but I decided not to go through with it after being offered a place after I made it.
Wow.
And yeah, it turned out to be a sort of a wise decision given the last few
Mhm.
years and seeing that doctors really they don't have much power, do they? They're beholden to the boards, the medical boards, and the medical boards are supposed to be beholden. They're not really, but they're supposed to be beholden to the research, to the medical researchers like myself now. So I've shifted
Right.
focus from research in, matters of history and religion, philosophy
Right.
to back to health, and especially looking at the COVID vaccines. And yeah, as you hinted, I found quite a few things that that were quite against the narrative. So one of those things, I guess, I really started with joining Peter Doshi. Peter Doshi is the senior editor, or one of the senior editors at the BMJ, the
Right.
famous British medical journal, and he published an article that included a counting window issue. And I piled in on top, and then his team did another one, and then I had another one. So we had 4 articles in the journal,
Right.
basically discussing how a lot of things went wrong in the clinical trials and observational studies regarding the COVID vaccines, and they're most likely exaggerating the effectiveness and
Right.
also the safety from my contributions of the vaccines. And one way, perhaps the big way in which the effectiveness and the efficacy was exaggerated was this counting window issue where COVID cases in the partially vaccinated are ignored,
Right.
right? So they have an advantage over the unvaccinated. And of course, you're skipping over relevant, highly relevant data, especially if the vaccines turn out to be negatively effective, which is another project I worked on.
Right.
And in the worst cases, they're not just ignored, they're actually added to the unvaccinated.
First of all, regarding the vaccines that were available in Australia, I mean, what were the brands that were available at the time?
Yeah, we had AstraZeneca very early on, and
Hmm.
Pfizer and Moderna, and I think now Novavax available. I don't care. I might have taken Novavax if that came first. Certainly, I
Right.
was interested in Valnueva because Valnueva seems to me to be the most like an actual proper vaccine. I think Sinopharm might be like that as well from China.
Right. Right.
But Valnueva
Yeah, I
was, I
know.
think, it was supposed to be the whole virus, but attenuated, like a vaccine is supposed to
Sure.
be.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Just like a killed virus vaccine. Right. Right.
Yeah, I was very concerned with the mRNA and DNA technology. I think that people often skip over the DNA vaccines. They're basically the
Yeah.
same, like it's the same sort
Right.
of
Right.
idea. Some people have said, I'm glad I avoided Pfizer. I took AstraZeneca. I was like, what are you talking about? It's the same novel technology. I mean, the
Exactly.
mRNA ones maybe have additional concerns, but
Right.
they both, both sets have the novel technology that hasn't really been successful in humans before. It's horrifying just thinking about how it works. That's one of the things that got me thinking, yeah, I'm not doing this. I have had
Right.
autoimmune issues in the past. So when I hear that this
Yeah.
so-called vaccine hijacks your cells and gets it to produce a pathogen, the
Right.
first thing I think of is, well, what if it doesn't turn off? Where's the off switch? Are they making an antidote with it as well in case things go wrong? And of course they didn't. So
Right.
I'm like, yeah, I'm not doing that. What if we can't turn it off? And look what happened. Years later, we're still finding people with the vaccine spike protein circulating in their bodies. That's hugely concerning, and we don't know what that means just yet. I suspect
No.
we're going to be finding out this 5 to 10 year period. I think we're going to be finding out a lot of that stuff with regards to cancer, fertility. We already know about cardiovascular problems. I've shown, I had something published, if you can call it that, as a rapid response in the BMJ about
Right.
how the risks outweigh the benefits for the young and healthy, at least.
That's a really, really great article. Yeah, I think you can get it on. I saw it on Google Scholar.
Yeah, yeah. There's
Yeah.
many ways. It's on my OK Then News site as well. It's on the BMJ, so there's many of ways to access it. I use their own data against them. So the
Right.
BMJ is from the UK, and I use the UK official ONS data, official government data on the numbers needed to vaccinate to get a positive result. And for the young and
Mhm.
healthy, it was in the hundreds of thousands to prevent a serious COVID hospitalization. Now, when you get to that number, it's like, is that an artifact? It's like it's nothing. What would it be
Right.
for a death? 1 in 1 million, 1 in 5 million? It's just absurd. But we're also seeing a lot of research on myocarditis showing that for young males, it could be one in every couple of thousand. Now, if
Right.
1 in 5, 1 in 10 of those dies within a few years, I mean, that you compare that with hundreds of thousands, it's like, well, clearly the risk outweighs the benefit just for that one side effect. We're not even talking about the other cardiovascular issues, right? Pericarditis and the blood clotting and everything else, the brain hemorrhages I've seen, right?
Right.
Which took the life of someone from my university, a young person as well.
Oh, I'm so
There's
sorry.
plenty,
Yeah.
there's plenty we're not even talking about. Just the myocarditis alone shows to me that the risk outweighs the benefit for the young and healthy, at least. And I did something with AI about this, and they agreed.
Right.
So that will probably be published over the coming months as well. But why we're talking is specifically, I think, the critique of Watson et al. That I just recently had published, that
Hmm.
sort of got popular on social media. For me, anyway,
Yes.
I don't have any audience, but that one that one went fairly popular because a few people shared it, like a Robert Malone, Peter McCullough, and so forth.
Right.
And so that was a critique published in a peer-reviewed journal now, critique of Watson et al. And Watson et al. Is the study that everyone sort of knows about, the
Right.
article that says the jab saved like tens of millions of lives within 1 year. And
Right.
I
Right.
show
I've
many,
seen it.
many ways
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
in which the
Hmm.
studies, yeah, is very flawed. It's unreliable.
I hear that so much. That figure. It's like nails on a chalkboard. How
Yeah.
many lives? 10 million lives that the COVID vaccine saved. But I'm the
Mm.
one that looks like all the vaccine deaths. That
Right.
were estimated by like Mark Skidmore. Early on in the
Well, that's one
pandemic.
point we're going to have to bring up when it comes to looking at this study. That's right, the deaths.
Exactly. Exactly. So yeah. Yeah. Please break that down.
So this study, and very quickly, it got acknowledged by the FDA. It's put into the official record at the U.S.
Right.
Senate by Senator Ron Johnson. So they can't ignore it. There might be liability issues over this now because the
Right.
U.S. government has actually referred to Watson et al. Too as one of their key resources showing the success of the vaccines. So
Hmm.
here we go. Straight off the bat, the first thing is Watson et al. Is a model. It's a computer model. It's not reality. Right?
No.
Models are not reality. It all depends on the assumptions. The assumptions generally are wrong, and the map is not the territory. Right. So instead of using, and I mentioned this, I think, a couple of times in the critique as well, they're not using actual data. Like if they would use actual data, what I would do is look at the unvaccinated and the vaccinated, compare them, see who's doing better with regards to who's dying more from cardiovascular problems, who's dying more from cancer, who's dying more from COVID. Right. It
Hmm.
might be surprising, but I think there's some negative effectiveness at play
Right.
where the vaccines actually make it more likely you get COVID and eventually die from COVID. So I think that's how we're going to do it. Compare the vaccinated and the unvaccinated directly, right? Get rid of
Right.
confounding variables, where you can do that as the gold standard method under trial conditions, but that's very unlikely now. And the trials we did have were pretty bogus. There's many reasons for that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, but what they did, yeah, they did a model, they plugged in some numbers and said, hey, look at that, the jab saved tens of millions of lives. And what about these numbers? Well, there's the numbers for the efficacy, effectiveness of the vaccines. And as I showed already, right, along with Peter Doshi's team in JECP journal, those numbers are very likely inflated. So,
Right.
I mean, already they're using data that just makes you think, well, this study is pretty pointless then, isn't it? We need to use the real data. And related to that, there's potentially a bigger issue, because this is an issue that's not contestable. Like, everybody in the mainstream of science, we're pretty much on the fringes, but everybody in mainstream science already acknowledges that this cannot be the case. Watson et al. Assumes static effectiveness. Like the vaccine, this is what the effectiveness is, and we're putting that in the model, and then it stays that way. Now, we all know that's not true, right?
Right.
The effectiveness of the vaccines, if there is any at all, declines, and very rapidly, even for death. We're talking within months it's gone. And that's why it gets people like me thinking, well, if it's gone in a few months, is there any effectiveness at all? Certainly not long term, but in the short
Right.
term, was it an illusion? And we showed that it definitely could be, right, with the counting window problems. So if you look at the real data, yeah, it could very well be an illusion. It might even be negatively effective from the very beginning, making it more likely, because it's tinkering with your immune system. It's doing things like I hinted at before, that, well, maybe there's no off switch. It's causing autoimmune issues and all the rest of it.
Right.
So, yeah, static vaccine effectiveness, absolutely ridiculous. The mainstream of science understands even that the effectiveness drops off really quickly. And that's why you need boosters, right?
Right. Right.
You would need
Absolutely.
booster shots otherwise, right? So
Exactly.
again,
Talk
studies.
about the window that was used in the original, I think it was the original Pfizer trials, one that I know the best.
Mhm.
Talk about that analysis, because I think more people need to know about that, and the issues that you broke down from a really logical perspective.
So in the Pfizer and Moderna trials, basically what's happening, they're using these strange counting windows. I would,
Mhm.
again, if I were doing it, coming from the industry as well, if I was checking how a medical product works, I would want to see from day one what's going on, comparing the people that took the product and didn't take the product. But they're effectively ignoring a lot of the relevant data from people who did take the product. So they're only counting you as fully vaccinated at a certain time after the full program. So 2 doses. After the second dose, usually it's a week or two,
Mhm.
sometimes even longer. I think I saw in one it was 3 weeks. And from that point, you're considered fully vaccinated. So then they start counting COVID cases from there. So you're missing all the people that got COVID who were vaccinated, who received the first dose onwards up until
Right.
full vaccination status. You're missing all of that relevant data. What if it goes up? And the funny thing is, if you can call it funny, apart from all the stuff about negative effectiveness, a few of the mainstream studies actually did show that infections ticked up during that period of partial vaccination. So this is highly, highly relevant data. If they got a COVID infection, they could die. This is meant to be
Right.
the most deadly thing ever, right? So it's just incredible that they're ignoring this data. And in the worst cases, they're not just ignoring it, they're adding it to the unvaccinated as well. So, and there's a few other issues with the Pfizer trial as well. There was the question of fraud that we saw with that article in the BMJ. Brooke Jackson did
Right.
some marvelous work there. And also, there's other things that we found. Doshi's team found that there were actually a ton of people, like thousands of people, that were suspected of having COVID, but they didn't get a positive test. So just ignore them, right? So yeah, a lot of things went wrong. It probably would have been better to do an intention to treat analysis, to just look
Mhm.
at, these are the people that are in the treatment group. They actually did receive something. Let's see how they're tracking with the people that were in the placebo group, right? And
Right.
that effectively didn't happen. And then on top of that, the trial ended after just a few months, basically, because they said, you know
Exactly.
what, the vaccine is so good, it's unethical not to offer it to the unvaccinated. So we'll offer it to the people that got the
Right.
placebo. And then that's it. So now we have no long-term data that's even possible. Right? Not only don't we have long-term data, we're only a couple of years out. It's not even possible anymore with the trials because they effectively mixed the groups. So a lot of stuff went wrong with the Pfizer Moderna clinical trials, and there's plenty also that went wrong with the observational studies. One of the things that's wrong with a lot of these studies and with the trials, obviously, is the conflicts of interest. And I bring that up in the critique as well of Watson et al. Is
Right.
that even these authors too, they have conflicts of interest. They have the ties to big pharma, so it's clearly financial conflicts of interest. They have ties to WHO, Gavi, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Wellcome
Hmm.
Trust, right? But there's also the political conflicts of interest, as if money wasn't already entwined with the political realm. But we
Right.
have, for example, the drug companies being regulated by themselves, basically, because they're funding the regulators, and the regulators are part of the government. So it's a
Right.
very, very strange situation. Strange if you're fairly naive, at least, if you're willing to think a bit beyond. It's like, well, that makes sense from a very, very dark place. It makes sense.
In the United States, we have FDA. FDA has fast track. It's a
Yeah.
clear conflict of interest. Talk about the Australian system.
I'll get back to that. Just want to
Yeah.
quickly
Uh,
add from my previous point, there's also political conflicts of interest, especially with
right.
this study. The head of the research group that produced the study wasn't listed on the paper, but I looked them up, and that was Professor Neil Ferguson. That's
Oh
Professor
my.
Lockdown of the UK, who was so influential in bringing about the lockdowns, which served as models for lockdowns worldwide as well. And then he hypocritically violated those own lockdowns, cheating, having an affair with a married woman.
Hmm.
Incredible scenario. And of course, the lockdowns led to the vaccine mandates as well, especially here in Sydney. So, bringing back to the issue with regulators and big pharma and the tentacles of big pharma in government, if if you said 20 years ago, 30 years ago, that basically all the companies are owned by the same few people, the rich control the world, you're a conspiracy theorist, right? You're a Marxist too, but you're a conspiracy theorist.
Right.
And
Right.
now it's just true. Now it's just obviously true. And they give us the data. They give us the financial data to confirm that. So you can jump on the big search engines. You can look at CNN Business or CNN Money, and you can look at the shareholders, the institutional shareholders of the big companies. And what you'll find is that for big pharma, for your Pfizer's, for example, for the mainstream media, that includes CNN, MSN, and even MSNBC, and even Fox News, if you would believe it, they're all owned by the same few people.
Right.
Right? And this goes for big food as well, the so-called health food companies, the junk food companies, your Pepsis, your Cokes, right? Big energy tech companies. And it all seems very hypocritical, doesn't it? When the big companies are big on spreading the message,
Right.
of equality and tolerance and environmentalism and so forth. And yet they own big oil as well, right? The same few people are owning everything. So the top shareholders, they're usually the big fund managers like BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street and Berkshire Hathaway. And generally, I found that Vanguard tends to be on top because they own each other as well, right?
Right.
So you're already thinking, gee, that looks really strange, doesn't it? Why do they own each other? And Vanguard's sort of on top because the others can't own Vanguard. Vanguard, or they sort of can
Mhm.
indirectly. Vanguard's like a sort of a credit union where it's owned by the people that are invested in it. Now, you might have some small, tiny portion of Vanguard with your 401k or your pension accounts and
Right.
so forth.
Right.
But the real owners and the real people that control it, the ones that get their buddies on the boards and make all the decisions, they are the wealthiest people by definition, right? The billionaires of the world, the trillionaire families of the world who are invested so much more heavily than we are in these organizations. So it is true. It's undeniable now. And they're giving us, you get this from CNN, who's part of it, right? They're giving us this information. You can easily look it up. So Big Pharma, mainstream media that was carrying order for Big Pharma, for
Right.
Pfizer, they're actually owned by the same few people that are also controlling government and getting their people in governments, like with the WEF, with Schwab bragging about infiltrating governments around the world. I mean, it's now
Right.
just, it's not a conspiracy theory anymore. It's just obvious. It's so
Right.
obviously true.
It's out in the open. People use the acronym for the Australian health system. I can't remember what it is.
You might be thinking
People,
of the TGA, which is like 96% funded by the people they're
yeah,
regulating,
yeah, the
by industry.
TGA, I mean, they were front and center in terms of these draconian measures, and I can't remember which was worse, Queensland or New South Wales, but
Oh,
it
New
was
South Wales
horrible.
over Queensland for sure, and
Hmm.
Victoria probably had the worst lockdown. They also had the curfew on top of that, which we
Right.
just recently found. This is what's curious about the COVID situation. Not only did they get a lot wrong, and this is where you've
Mhm.
got to start thinking, I think, a bit more dark and a bit more cynical. They got a
Right.
lot wrong. They got a lot of big things wrong. It's not a small thing, the things that they got wrong. They got a hell of a lot wrong. and it was done all over the world basically the same way, right? Nearly every single country.
Right.
And they didn't just get things wrong. There were instances where we know they lied, right? They told us it was A when they knew it was B. And one of these
Hmm.
instances just came out here in Australia. No uproar. No one cares. Aussies are just pathetic. They're lazy. She'll be right, mate. No, she'll not be right unless people like us do something about it, right? You
Right.
probably know that when you went there, they have a sort of a she'll be right attitude, bordering on Africa time attitude.
Yeah.
And
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, they were caught out lying about the curfew, the Melbourne curfew. So Melbourne had one of the worst lockdowns in the world, but they also had the curfew. You know, you had to be home by 8:30 or whatever. You couldn't leave
Hmm.
the house.
Because
And it
viruses are
was
more
found
active
out
at
that
night, right? Yep.
that decision, all the decisions were supposed to be made. They said they were made based on the health advice. That decision was made by the politicians before the health advice came in. In fact, the health
Right.
officer was watching on TV because they were on holiday. They're watching on TV the premier announcing it. That's Dan Andrews, the president of Danistan, Melbourne.
Hmm.
So they're watching it on TV and they're like, "Huh? I didn't recommend this. Let's quickly call Dan Andrews up and say, hey, do you want me to recommend what you just enforced? Do you want me to recommend it?" So caught out in absolute corruption, absolute lies. Nothing is happening about it. No one cares. It's absolutely unbelievable. Nothing only happens unless we do something about it. So all the people out there that think, nothing ever happens, bugger it. It's like, well, it can happen. You need to do it, right? Look what I've done. I've come out of nowhere. I've taken on Goliath, right? I've taken on New South
Right.
Wales Health,
Right.
and I've won. And I've gotten stuff published in medical journals, not the predatory journals, the proper journals published by your likes of Wiley, Oxford University Press, etc., Elsevier, right? The big publishing houses. And I'm nobody. I've come out of nowhere and I've done this. Everybody can do something, right? And especially together, we can win this thing.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that so much. I mean, you aren't nobody, but you've gone up against Goliath, and seeing your tenacity to get this published in journals like the BMJ, other reputable journals. It's really a triumph. I know that the blowback on that has been tremendous. In just a few minutes that we have, just if you could summarize that.
Yeah, there's been quite a bit. I was treated very harshly by my former employer, of course, and it
Right.
wasn't just the firing; it was also the way they went about it. One thing, for example, is that they asked us. I think there were hundreds of us there that didn't want to take the vaccine. They asked us to make our case, and they even
Hmm.
discussed the possibility of us having part-time jobs from home, which is what I already had. So I'm like, yes, I'm going to be good.
Right.
And so they were giving us false hope because in the end, none of that eventuated. I made my case using logic, using evidence, and all I got back, this was heartbreaking. All I got back was basically, see, you refused to take it. You're
Wow.
fired. So it was very cruel what happened. Since then, I've been mistreated by society, by the community, by friends and family, right? Friends who are no longer friends. I've been treated very harshly. There's been censorship as well, including at my
Hmm.
own university.
You've been called out in the media.
I'm not sure about that one. As I said,
Yeah.
I'm nobody. I haven't. I've been flying under the radar, and that's probably why I've been able to publish some stuff too. Because if
Right.
they look at
Right.
a paper and they see someone like Malone, they're like, "Yeah, no, thanks." But then they
Right.
see
Right.
me and they're like, "Oh, he's nobody. What is he, Sydney? Oh, all right, yeah, we can let that one through." So I think me being a nobody has actually helped in getting some things published and not
Right.
having so much negative baggage. Because yeah, the media's ignored me, even the alternative media who you think would be all over my research. Even I don't understand it. They, for the
Right.
most part, have been ignoring my research as well. It's getting harder and harder to do that now, of
Right.
course,
Well,
especially with the US Senate hearing and so forth.
my intent is to spread the word, not that I want to bring more persecution on you, but people need to know about your work.
I think I've crossed the Rubicon. I think I'm going to need support from the other side. I keep saying
Hmm.
I'm a nobody because, well, I am. I have no audience on Substack, on Twitter. A few days ago, I still had just a couple of hundred followers on Twitter, for example, or X, for example. I'm earning
Right.
less than minimum wage. I'm a nobody, and I have virtually no power. And yet, you know, through sheer force of will, I just keep pushing through and trying to do my bit, mainly for my own case. There's the selfish
Hmm.
aspect to it as well,
Right.
but there's also the selflessness aspect to it, because I'm sharing everything that I'm finding with others, and I'm helping others with their cases as well. And hopefully, eventually, I'll be, embraced by this alternative health community and supported by them, and can actually do more, get well, wrap up my cases, get better, and contribute more. I think I have a lot more to contribute, not just
Absolutely.
about COVID vaccines or vaccines in general. There's other aspects of well to do with Maha that I very much agree with, like different ways of eating, for example. And I've got an article coming out on that, on my own experience with that as a case study. So I've got a
Wow.
lot more to contribute. But yeah, if nobody hears about me, it's not going to, get anywhere.
Well, absolutely. Let's change that. Let's change that. Let's make this go viral. Raphael, I'm so thankful that you came on the show today. And we don't want this information, because you are helping people. You've had your own experience. You're fighting back on your own experience and winning, which is so inspirational for people who've been through that, who have done the same, even people who are fighting because they were injured by the COVID vaccine. So thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for that. And could I just be a bit American for once and
Sure.
plug something, give you a teaser? I've
Please.
got I've got an article that's going to be coming out that I think is a bit of a smoking gun about the COVID
Hmm.
vaccines. It's to do
Great.
with excess mortality. I've done some research on that before. This is another level. I'm actually able to rule out the alternatives to COVID vaccines. So I think it's pretty decisive that yes, the excess mortality we're seeing is due to the vaccine. So that should be coming out shortly. And I've
Right,
got a
right.
senior scientist on
Are we
board.
going to follow? Are you going to be able to announce that on your Substack?
Yeah, I mean, it's
News?
the usual approach. I'll have it published in the journal. I'll talk about it on my OK Then Use Substack. I'll mention it on X. And
Right.
hopefully some of my friends, people like Robert Malone and so forth, will share it. And that's how people will know about it. And yourself,
Absolutely.
of course, CHD. And yeah,
Oh, of course.
that's how
Absolutely.
people will
Well, I
share.
look forward to it. And let us know as well. I mean, that the
Yeah.
problem with Maha right now is we're playing whack-a-mole, and there's too many things to do and not enough people to do it. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm so thankful that you do what you do every day.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'll keep doing what I can do, and hopefully I'll finish my cases. I'll get better, and I can do even more. That would be great.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Raphael Lataster, and OK Then News. And thank you, everybody, for joining us for this important episode of Doctors and Scientists. Share, share, share with your friends so they can watch this as well.
G'day.
So thank you for being really brave and
Yeah.
coming and telling your story,
Yeah.
because we really need to get this Gardasil vaccine off the market.
Yes.
So appreciate you talking about it.
Yeah.
What age did you have the first Gardasil shot?
I got my first shot when I was 12.
And what made you go to have it?
I don't think it was purposely like we sought it out. I think it was more, recommended because, you're at that age and that, 12 you should.
When you were getting
know.
the DTaP
Oh,
and
yeah.
meningococcal vaccine the same day.
Yeah,
And then
so-
the doctor had been on us too.
So you went
Did
in
it
full.
For the
Just
DTaP,
normal.
because, going into the
School.
8th grade, you needed to have or the 7th grade, you needed to have the DTaP
Yeah.
shot.
So,
So you ended up having DTaP
meningoccal.
meningoccal.
and Gardasil.
and
Oh,
Gardasil.
What a
Yeah.
cocktail of vicious vaccines.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
All right. So they just suggested that you had that then. You didn't think about it, or you just.
Yeah.
They had been suggesting it before, and then that day, I don't know, it just, it was the worst mistake, right? That they're just like, I'm being a bad parent by not giving her this opportunity to not have cancer when she's older. So it was, if I only knew now what I didn't know then, but that was the beginning. And when it took us a good year and a half to even figure out that there was any relationship to the vaccines and what happened, because it was an immediate reaction.
To the first vaccine?
Yeah, to the
Yeah.
first
Have
dose.
you only had one dose?
2.
She
And
had
the
two.
second one made things.
Okay, let's talk about
Yeah.
the first one first of all.
Well, the first one, I don't think I hadn't started having seizures then. But...
With the first
Oh, no, I
one-
did actually.
With the first one, though, it was immediate reaction. We just didn't know it, because all of a sudden Isabella started having very pale complexion, very fatigued, and just not herself. And so we were going on a big trip, and so I set up with and she was having overheating episodes. And so I made an appointment for the pediatrician a few months fast forward to look into maybe having anemia or something, because
Out of
that
nowhere.
out of nowhere it was
sort
just
of-
it just kind of came up. And so then we went on this big trip, and that's when she started having these very bizarre, strange episodes.
Can you describe what they were like?
Yeah, so there were 2 that trip. The first was, that one was more of a panic attack. I had, I don't know, I just came from a chapel, but I had like a really huge like anxiety attack, and I felt I was like completely disoriented. I didn't know what was going on, and later that day I was having sort of like almost hallucinations and delusions. And so that was the first sort of episode, but then I'd say about a week and a half later I had a seizure. It started out as sort of, overheating, and then it turned into actual convulsions.
And it lasted, you're talking about the one in Greece?
Yeah.
It lasted 45 minutes. I mean,
Yeah.
it was,
Which isn't normal.
that was like, you talk about, I mean, I can talk about it without crying right now, because we've been through it a lot together, but I didn't know what was happening. Like, 1 minute we're just in this train station, and the next minute she's on the ground, and I didn't know what to really do, because I thought, oh my gosh, she's overheating, let's take care of her overheating. But then the convulsing started and everything else, and then suddenly she like kind of was losing consciousness. And so I'm like just trying to keep like my brain, and I'm thinking, we're in a foreign country, do I want her to go to the hospital? Yes, I want her to go to the hospital, but I'm afraid what's going to happen if we send her to the hospital. Anyway, long story short, we did call the paramedics, and the neurologist that saw her said, you need to go to your doctor as soon as you go back. That's a seizure. And then when I was like, well, we already have appointments set up, and that was when we got back. She had an episode at school, like within a few days we got back, and I was like, well, at least we have the appointment with the doctor that day. And this is where the biggest mistake of everything comes into play, because that day when we got to the doctor, she was just like patting us and saying, oh, it's just a panic attack. It's just, you just need to go see a psychologist. And she said, but you're here today, so you should get the second Gardasil shot. And if
Oh, I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah.
it's unbelievable, because now I know, like, her her body was in complete high alert,
Yeah.
from this
It was
episode
already
that she,
compromised.
and then so that was when everything just started to tumble from there. Isabella couldn't get out of bed. She was just chained to, she was like in a room all the time. She was having strange stomach.
Why were you? Can you describe how you were feeling?
I mean, it's hard to remember now, because I think in some ways I've kind of blocked it all out, but I think I just didn't, I felt almost like numb. There wasn't anything there. There wasn't really any life, if that makes any sense.
It was like, if you only knew her when she was younger, like we would be at SeaWorld and someone would pick her out to be the stage person, to come up on stage. She was that kind of person. I mean, and always the entertainer of the group. So many friends, so active that we're like, oh my gosh, can we do one more thing? And she was always driving it to, I don't want to see my friends. I can't go to school. I can't go to any of my activities. She was...
Was it because you just felt ill? What was going on?
I think I didn't really, know what was going on. I think I was, just sort of I didn't, I couldn't identify what I was feeling. I was, I just assumed that it just sort of happened. And I just, again, like, there were no, like, when I was not in my, like, normal self, I was not really I just wasn't thinking, I wasn't there. And if I was thinking, I was, having irrational thoughts. And, I started having a bunch of more psychological symptoms. And so it was either I was completely, I feel like, devoid of emotion and not, there, or I was, crazy.
By the way, we hear this a lot.
Yeah.
Too many times for it to, it's
I
not
know.
a coincidence. There's a lot of,
Yeah.
and actually those girls and boys are then being given psychotropic drugs, which is making everything even worse.
Yeah,
so.
and that's what happened to me. They put me, even the smallest, dosage of.
Well, they tried like anti-seizure, even the anti-seizure medications, the smallest dosage would make her be like a drunk zombie. She just couldn't function. She couldn't go to school.
For the seizures, that
For the
is.
seizures.
Yeah, for the seizures.
And do they give you stuff for the anxiety?
Well,
yes.
After, before and then, not at the same time, but even the smallest dosage
Of those.
it
Yeah.
did not. It was just horrible. It made things worse, and that's where you see people going down like then a whole other, if you don't pull them off it, because then they start treating the other new symptoms that arise from the medications. But Isabella is a warrior princess. She was so she was having different symptoms on different days. It would be like one day she would be couldn't walk. One day it would be she, wouldn't want to eat. It was like someone had a voodoo doll. She had so many symptoms every day. It was like a new day. It was like someone didn't want us to have, like, to get anything under control.
Yeah.
We just couldn't, get a handle on any of
Yeah.
it. And we just went to endocrinologists, we went to neurologists, we went to gastroenterologists, we went to the first, initially when we went to, because I'm like, okay, we should go to the psychologist, I guess, let's go check this out. And she was like, oh, she's having stomach migraines. And I'm like, perfect, yay, end of discussion. And then within a year, all of these strange psychological symptoms appeared, and you have this check-off list of what might be like bad thoughts, this or that you're checking off. She checked off every single one of those, and the doctor is like, do we need to put you into a hospital? And it was scary. She was one day suicidal, one day depressed, the next day having seizures, and then other types of seizures that were more physical, that she would have paralysis, she would have facial paralysis, I would come to pick her up from school, she couldn't walk, just light sensitive, flash photography, drop to the ground, noise sensitive, food sensitive, everything sensitive.
Yeah.
It was 4 years of constant battles. Constant battles. And
how did you work out it was the Gardasil? So when you went for your second Gardasil, was that the
Yeah.
only vaccine you had that day?
yes.
Yes, that
All
was.
right,
Yes.
so that means you're narrowing
Yes.
it down. Okay, got it.
I mean, it was kind of strange how I figured it out. One day I had asked for Isabella's records and so her vaccine report, and so one day, it was like 2-3 years ago, they had this thing with Katie Couric, and I happened to come across it on she had a television show about the HPV shot, and I happened to go online and look at the comments, and in between all the people that were making like one way or the other, there were all these comments of moms, and they sounded just like her story, and they were like very articulate. They weren't saying bad vaccine, good vaccine. They weren't saying anything. They were just saying, we had the vaccine and then this is what happened to my child. And so it was like all of a sudden, like all it just hit me, and I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe not a single person put this together, that, you know, all these symptoms immediately started right after, and then especially after the second vaccine, it was that week again, stomach issues and all kinds of things. And actually her pediatrician called us and said, I saw that she's having a lot of testing done. Is everything okay? And I said, no, everything's not okay. And I'm just wondering something. When she took the Gardasil vaccine, did it ever occur to you that she might have a reaction? And she was like, well, some people are more sensitive than others. And I was like, but you never said that to us when we took the vaccine. You know, it was the opposite. And, you know, now we are having to have a person, a young lady, not be able to enjoy her life. Her life before was so full, and you know, for 4 years it was devoid of
anything.
life. You know, just going to doctor's appointments, just, you know, in her room, not being able to be with friends, not being able to do her dancing, singing, all the things that she loved in her life.
Yeah.
And what about now, though? Can you do any of those things now?
Yeah. Now things are, you know, so much better. Things didn't start getting better until about a year ago, because that's when we sort of figured out that I had PANS, which is pediatric acute neuropsychiatric.
Can you speak up a tiny bit?
Sorry, pediatric acute neuropsychiatric syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's sort of when we sort of pinpointed what had happened. So, you know, there are a multitude of things that can trigger that, but one of them is a vaccine injury. So then once we sort of, you know, figured out that I had that, and there were also tests that showed, you know, inflammation in the brain and different antibodies, we sort of, you know, we had something to go off of, and so we tried antibiotics, which is the most common thing, but unfortunately that didn't work. So we just started healing alternatively, and so we started by just sort of healing the gut, healing autoimmune, so diet changes and everything, and then you know, acupuncture, you know, craniosacral.
Are you off all your psychotropic meds?
Yes.
Yeah,
long gone.
That's probably another reason why
Oh,
you're feeling
yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
yeah, definitely.
She only did them for a very short period
Which
of
is
time.
good.
I
Yeah.
just said, this is not working. This doesn't work for her.
Yeah.
And
made things
with this
worse.
They're
condition,
saying, please don't take any more vaccines, but you wouldn't, I presume.
No. No.
You're good on that one.
No.
I can safely say with that.
Definitely not.
no. No.
We've
But so, okay,
that
what would
out.
be really nice is if you could talk to that 13-year-old girl that's watching and
before.
she thinks that she's not going to get cancer if she has
Yeah.
the Gardasil.
Honestly, it's not worth it. While there's a chance, this specific, you know, treatment, as far as I've heard, doesn't actually help strains in your 13. While some girls are, you know, sexually active at 13, I know you're not, and most girls aren't. So yes, cancer is terrible and it's horrible, but would you rather that or also have a not equally terrible life, but almost as bad life of, you know, not being able to do anything, having psychological symptoms, having all of these physical symptoms?
Unless if you're lucky and you don't end up like those
dead.
two girls
Yeah.
over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can only imagine if she had had the third vaccine. I mean, thank goodness
Yeah.
when they called me for it, I said, we're too busy. You know, we don't have time to come in and get in, you know,
Yeah.
the third vaccine. She's sick, you know.
Yeah, so just
Read the ingredients on the insert.
Yeah.
Well,
do you want that in your body?
yeah,
and-
and be aware that, you know, side effects are a possibility. You know, that's, no one told me that. No one told us that. So
And that's the thing. I mean, I feel like irresponsible because up until the time that she had this vaccine reaction, you know, I always trusted doctors, and I didn't question them. I guess I didn't question what they said. I didn't question, and you know, I didn't question, and that has taught me a great lesson with unfortunately, with the health of my daughter, is that you have to question, because not everybody, maybe some people can tolerate the chemicals that are in the vaccines, but not everybody can. And, you know, if there's a side effect from an aspirin, we watch on the news every day, you know, you take this, it has a side effect. You take that, it has a side effect. So why are we saying that all vaccines are 100% perfectly fine and safe to take? There's just needs to be some safeguards to make sure what's in the vaccine is going to actually be safe.
Yeah.
Thank you both
Thank you.
so much. I'm not going to film you signing the bus because...
Yeah, I already did.
She signed it. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we won't put the cameras on that because you don't...
Yeah, the name.
The name.
Yeah. Yeah, so.
So, say goodbye to everyone on Periscope.
Bye. I hope I was
And
somewhat
you should
helpful.
watch this back. It's very, very helpful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Okay,
Oh my
bye
goodness.
everybody.
Bye.